Hello all. In this part of our chapter on atoms and nuclei, we are going to lay focus on the important aspects of radioactivity, basically nuclear energy, nuclear fission, uranium reactor, controlled chain reaction, nuclear fusion, and last but not the least, we are going to discuss about the effects of the nuclear bomb also. At the end, I have put up a short video clip on how the world's first nuclear bomb was dropped on Hiroshima by the United States in the Second World War. Please do watch this clip. In this chapter on atoms and nuclei, we are going ahead, and this is what we are discussing about radioactivity part 3. In this part, we are going to lay stress on nuclear energy, nuclear fission, uranium reactor, chain reaction, nuclear fission, and nuclear bomb. Now let us see how the nuclear reactor looks like from inside. We see here the small stairs leading towards the center of this reactor, and here are some sort of nuclear fuels embedded. These are the control rods. These are called as the control rods or moderators, which are going to be inserted downwards when the rate of reaction goes on increasing. So these staircases lead here spirally. You can see there we are as they go down towards the nuclear reactor. So here the fuel for nuclear reaction, basically it is uranium 235, is used here. We are going to discuss it later on. First we are going to discuss what and how is India's nuclear energy program. Nuclear power is the fourth largest source of electricity in India after thermal, hydroelectric and renewable resources of energy. Now these sources of energy, let us say thermal, they use coal or wood. That means they are the conventional sources of energy. We also have the hydroelectric power stations where water is used to rotate turbines and steam is generated, and this steam is used to generate electricity. Also, there are different sources of electricity. Nuclear power is the use of sustained nuclear fission to generate heat and electricity. Nuclear power plants provide about 5.7% of the world's energy and 13% of the world's electricity. There were 439 nuclear power reactors in operation in the world, operating in 31 countries, and in India also our nuclear program has gained a lot of strength. Just as many conventional thermal power stations generate electricity by harnessing the thermal energy released from burning fossil fuels, that is coal, the nuclear power plants convert the energy released from the nucleus of an atom via the nuclear fission that takes place in a nuclear reactor. The heat is removed from the reactor core by a cooling system that uses the heat to generate steam, which drives a steam turbine connected to a generator producing electricity. This is a schematic diagram of how the nuclear energy is harnessed by way of nuclear fission. As you see here, a nucleus of uranium 235. This is the nucleus of uranium 235. You see it is a heavy nucleus and it is bombarded by a highly energetic neutron. And this bombardment splits the uranium nucleus into two parts, and mainly we call these as the daughter nuclei. And let us see how the daughter nuclei look like. This is one of the daughter nuclei, barium 141. Along with barium 141, energy and neutrons are generated. Here, along with barium 141, the next daughter nuclei, which is called as krypton 92, is generated. Now, this nucleus is a stable nucleus. That means from a parent element by bombardment of a heavy neutron on uranium 235, two daughter nuclei are formed along with the emission of highly energetic three neutrons and a lot of energy every time. Now, if these three electrons further collide with the other uranium nuclei, the process goes on repeating, and every fission gives rise to three neutrons and a lot of energy. So, the reaction proceeds in multiples of 3. That means 3, 3, 3, 9, 27, 81, and so on. And the rate of the reaction is very high. Every time a large number of neutrons along with energy is generated. This is a colored schematic diagram. This is how fusion takes place. We are going to discuss it later. Now this is a block diagram of energy transformation, how it occurs during generation of electricity in a nuclear reactor. We see the first block, we have the nuclear energy produced by the nuclear fission of a radioactive substance, that is uranium. Now this nuclear energy gets converted into heat energy. Heat energy, it boils water in the steam generator to produce steam. So the main part of this is fission, which releases the nuclear energy in the form of heat energy, and the next part, this heat energy is used as kinetic energy to what happens to rotate the turbines to generate electricity, and this electricity is used for different purposes. It is channeled through hydroelectric power stations to substations and then to the consumers. So this is a schematic block diagram of how the energy transformation occurs during the generation of electricity. So these are the effects of nuclear energy production. The advantage is, as we know, that unlike other production of energy like the thermal energy, they do not pollute the air and they do not release harmful gases. Basically, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide are the harmful gases which are released during the consumption of any particular fuel besides the nuclear energy. What about the fuel? Only a small amount of radioactive substance is needed and the lower cost is involved in producing electrical energy. The most important point is that nuclear energy removes our dependence on the fossil fuels. The fossil fuels are not going to last till long. We know that the oil reserves and gas reserves, someday they may come to an end. Already, according to some data, we have coal which can last only up to 10 years from now onwards, and that is how the conventional energy sources are going to be exhausted, and therefore this is a very good substitute for production of energy. The nuclear energy is necessary because it is going to meet the ever increasing demand for energy. Now there are two ways to obtain nuclear energy. What is it? One way is called as nuclear fission and the other is called as nuclear fusion. So we have seen here that fission means splitting of a heavy nucleus into two parts with the emission of neutrons and energy. And here we have the fusion, that means two lighter nuclei like deuterium. This is an isotope of hydrogen, and tritium was also an isotope of hydrogen. If used together in this process, large amount of energy is liberated because the energy of the product is greater than that of the parent nuclei. I'm sorry, mass, and this energy defect is converted into, or mass defect is converted into energy, and we have helium generated along with neutron and the energy. So thus fusion is also used as a energy source, just like fission. We are going to discuss now about nuclear fission. The nuclear fission reaction, where the nucleus of a heavy radioactive element like uranium, plutonium, or thorium splits up into smaller nuclei when bombarded by low energy neutrons. A huge amount of heat is generated in this process, which is used in nuclear power plants to generate electricity. Once again, we come to the schematic diagram of a nuclear fission, where a neutron hits a uranium atom to make uranium 236. Now, this process may be represented by the following nuclear equation. We have nuclear fuel in the form of uranium. Uranium 23592 bombarded by neutron gives rise to barium 14156 and krypton 9236 plus emission of q neutrons and q as the amount of energy released in this particular reaction. Now when this is done, किती बाहेर पड़ते energy? The amount of energy typically released in this case of uranium 235 is around 200 million electron volt. Look at this figure. It is quite large as compared to a single atom of uranium. Just imagine how large amount of energy must be generated in the reactors. So that is so many joules of energy. Basically, we speak about energy generated in terms of million electron volts. So that is the equation for nuclear fission. Once again, let us see this as uranium 235 plus 0 and 1 gives barium 14156 plus krypton 9236 plus 3 neutrons and a certain amount or a large amount of energy. This is once again a systematic diagram how uranium splits into barium, krypton, 3 neutrons. 3 neutrons further bombard again the same uranium atom in the sample. Okay, again see how only one single neutron, when bombarding a uranium atom, 3 neutrons are generated. These 3 neutrons in turn generate large amounts of energy along with 3 plus 3, 6 neutrons, and the process goes on continuing when these neutrons bombard further uranium atoms in the fuel. Let us discuss about nuclear power plant. It is a thermal power station in which the heat source is one or more nuclear reactors. This large chimney type structure which we see here is called as a nuclear power plant. Basically, nuclear power plants are situated in remote areas where there is less population to escape the hazards of a nuclear disaster. So this is a nuclear power plant. In India, we have large number of power plants operating successfully, and we are going to see how many of them are there. And this is the power generation through a nuclear reactor. We have to look at the block diagram of the nuclear reactor. This block diagram hasn't been given in our textbooks, but in order to see how power is generated, see this here where the cursor is moving, this is the reactor core. The reactor core which we saw at the beginning of our presentation, the blue colored diagram, the reactor core at the center. Now this contains the fuel, uranium. Now what we see here, vertical, these are called as the control rods. So in the nuclear reactor, this type, this cylindrical form, we have the reactor core and the control rods. Now these control rods are called as moderators. They are also called as graphite. They are sometimes made up of lead or graphite, so that they control the nuclear fission, or they control basically the number of neutrons. Now, whatever heat is generated, this heat is carried away because, see here, we see the pipes with water circulating through them. Now this heat is carried away. This is a steam generator, and here we have the water tank. The steam is generated because of heat in this particular pipe. This heat causes the water to evaporate, and this steam escapes through this tube and it goes to rotate the steam turbine. And because of these turbines, there is generation of electricity which is collected by the electric power stations. Now, what happens when the steam turbines are rotated? The excess of energy is also carried out, or heat is carried out by water or the condenser, and similarly, it goes to the cooling tower. Now, so every time there is a nuclear fission, every time there is a large amount of energy liberated, every time this energy is used to create water vapor or steam which rotates turbines and generates electricity, and the heat is removed by these pipes which circulate cold water or through this cooling tower, and the water is made to fall in large ocean bodies or water bodies. Now, this is a pump which removes this hot or water containing heat here. So this is a schematic diagram of a power generation through nuclear reactor. This is one more diagram. The same type of functioning is shown here. Just the only difference is this is a more systematic diagram. Now how the reactor works. This reactor core contains silicon cylindrical tubes in which fuel is kept. The fuel is uranium 235, and the quantity of uranium occurring in this ore is generally 0.7%. Look, the fraction of the decimal here, which is used actually for the generation of electricity. The fuel rods are placed in substances of small atomic weight such as water, heavy water, carbon, and they are called as moderators. Moderator is used to slow down the speed of neutrons produced during the fission process to direct them towards the fuel. By the control rods, the number of neutrons produced are controlled because only one neutron has to produce for the fission reaction and the other two have to be absorbed. The control rods are made of cadmium or boron. The chain reaction takes place in the core and produces heat. The temperature rise is about 500 degrees centigrade. Now, because of this, the steam is produced and it is transported with the help of water or heavy water. The temperature of the steam coming out from the turbine is about 300 degrees centigrade, which is further cooled to produce water again. Now we are going to see about the disadvantages of the nuclear fission reaction. As seen, this fission reaction produces tremendous energy from a small amount of nuclear fuel. Once a fuel is added, a plant can work for years and does not produce greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. Disadvantages are: it is difficult to dispose the radioactive waste from nuclear fission. The risk of accidents is more in nuclear reactors, and actually there is a high cost of installation of nuclear plants.